The Jazz Spotlight, Episode 17. Hello Jazz Spotlight fans, Jani Lunga here. Welcome to the 17th episode of the Jazz Spotlight podcast and the second of this special edition of the Jazz Spotlight podcast. In case you missed yesterday's episode, episode 16, then you don't maybe know about this week. This week is a bit special because there is a special edition of the Jazz Spotlight podcast with some of the stars of the Pori Jazz Festival 2014. So yesterday, Monday, the first guest was just a great guitarist. He was Kevin Eubanks, who came on the podcast to talk about many things like growing up in Philly and playing in New York with jazz greats like Art Blakey and Roy Haynes, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and he also gave out advice for musicians, for young musicians. So if you missed it, you can find the episode at thejazzspotlight.com/episode 16. And it's going to be so that every day there's going to be a different guest for this week and this week only. And after this week, the podcast will go back to normal. So a weekly show, one episode every week with a new guest every week. The guest we have today is just a great musician. If you're from Washington, D.C., or, if you're from New York, then you probably know him. And especially if you're into piano music, piano jazz, then his name is definitely someone you know. Or even if you're into hip-hop, you probably have heard of him because he had been playing also with hip-hop stars like Q-Tip and Erykah Badu. Today I'm just so excited to welcome on the podcast Marc Cary to talk about many things like playing at the Pori Jazz Festival, growing up in Washington, D.C., is Marc Cary Focus Trio and their latest album, Four Directions. Like always, I just want to remind you that you can find the links of all the things we talk about in this episode with Mr. Cary at thejazzspotlight.com/episode 17. This is a Jazz Talk with Marc Cary. Enjoy. Hey Jazz Spotlight fans, how is it going? I'm Jani Lunga and I'm here from Pori Jazz Festival in Finland. And I have another guest for this series, this special series that we're running from the festival. And it's difficult where to start from about this guest because he's just a great artist, a great pianist. He grew up in Washington D.C. and I'm gonna ask him about Washington because I'm sure that many of you who are listening from D.C. would like to learn more about what impact growing up in D.C. had on him and his career, and he's performing here at the Pori Jazz Festival with his Focus Trio, and we're gonna talk about the latest album, Four Directions. It's with great pleasure that I welcome on the podcast Marc Cary. Hey, Mr. Cary, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome.
All right, welcome on the show. And what are your first thoughts about Pori Jazz for what you have seen?
This is my second time at the Pori Jazz Festival. I came maybe 2-3 years ago with David Murray and Macy Gray, and it was a great time. So to come back with my own group is just an honor. Yeah.
And I presume that when you came back, the festival had a different setting because this is the first year where the festival is, with 3 stages outdoor, and you're gonna perform here at this nice setting. The weather now is settling in. Let's hope it's not gonna rain. What are your expectations for the gig?
My expectations are pretty much for the band, that the group that I have, Focus Trio. We're obviously very focused, so no, but I just really look forward to expanding our musical, creative, pockets and just having a chance to perform, in front of a group of people that really want to hear music. I guess my only expectation is that we play our best.
And now that you mentioned the Focus Trio, let's talk about the trio for a while. How did you guys get together, and how did this project start?
Okay, well, we started this project, the group in itself, about 14 years ago. Samir Gupta, myself, and David Yule. That was the original group. And I found these guys in California, in the San Francisco area. I did a lot of traveling back and forth to San Francisco to develop the sound. And then as the years passed, a couple records passed, David Ewell decided to do some other things family-wise. So we've been, for the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years, been working with two bassists, Bernice Earl Travis and Rashawn Carter, who is with us now. Rashawn's pretty much been the bassist that's done most of the work and the albums. So this group has been developing this sound for the last 6 years. Although Samir and I have been together for about 14. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I'm gonna ask you about Four Directions, but before we go more into Four Directions, I just want to get stuck with the title, because the first thing I think about Four Directions is like north, south, west, east, so about traveling. And if you think about your journey as a musician, where do you think you are now, and where would you like to go to in the future?
Wow. Well, it's rare that I think about where I am. I'm always considering where I'm going. Although I guess that's a contradiction, because I'm very much in the moment, especially when it comes to music. So, hence the name Focus. That means really to focus on the moment. It means to be in the moment. So I rarely think about where we're going, because it's a journey. I mean, we have pretty much a direction that we're going in, which is at least four directions. No, but I mean, it's rare that I think about where I am and where I came from and all of that, because music is happening now. It's it's what we do at the moment. This is the only form that you can get. Well, this is one of the only forms that you can get an immediate gratification from what you do, whether the response is good or bad. You can know immediately. So to think about the future has no bearing on the present right now. So I try not to go too far ahead of myself, even though the music we're playing sometimes is received as if it's in the future.
And about Four Directions, what are the inspiration of the album? Where did you get the inspiration for these great compositions of Four Directions?
Yes. Well, there wasn't one place that everything came from. I think the title codifies the songs in a way, because the title deals with the indigenous mindset and indigenous spirituality of my Native American roots. So that's really what the title is about. The Four Directions is something that prayers go out to the four directions. So, like you said, north, south, east, and west, and everything in between. So it's really just about it's in a way it's a meditation. A musical meditation that we hope will span all the directions possible, And so far it has. I mean, we're here in Pori now, so, I think if you put these kind of ideas out there, things can happen, Even though it's a title of an album, it's still a thought that went into it.
No, and I think, it's, first of all, it's a great title. And also, what you just explained, even solidifies in a way that the concept that, people might think, where does the title come from? And it's, I think it's a very kind of nice background story that you gave us. And for those of you who perhaps don't know yet about the Marc Cary Focus Trio and Four Directions, you can just go to check it out. You can find also some tracks on YouTube. You can listen, and I'm sure you will fall in love with the music. And now we talked for a moment about the about the present, about Pori, the record. I would like to take a couple of steps back and go back to to your beginnings, because is it correct that you were born in New York and you moved when you were really young to Washington? So what impact has growing up in Washington had on your musical career?
Well, I think a lot. Starting with the family structure. I mean, it started with my mother and I. My mom and dad broke up, so For a while, it was just my mother and I, and then she remarried once we moved to D.C., which immediately put me into a family. You know, I had 2 brothers and sisters immediately. So moving to D.C. changed really the trajectory of my life in many ways. I had to go from being a single, you know, just as, you know, me and my mom, to sharing my mother with you know, a whole new family. And that also put me in the mindset of really trying to find something that I could hold on to. I had a very interesting upbringing, and the experiences that I had, I won't go into them, but a lot of those experiences led me to music. And music became the dividing line between a life of disparity or a life of peace and love. Because I think the path that I was on prior to me really attaching myself to music was a destructive path. So my choice to go for music was really a healing thing. And that's why I'm so deeply into it now. It's just become almost a prayer. So when I play music, I'm praying. This is my prayer, you know. It's really that deep for me. Although I don't, you know, attach every musical experience to that same thing. But when we play with the Focus Trio, it's truly a prayer, man. This is family. In fact, when we talk about my career, Rashawn's, my bassist, Rashawn Carter's father gave me my first gig, my first jazz gig. So I met him when he was a baby. You know, and I was young too. I was probably 16 or maybe, you know, less than 18. Yeah, I was about 16, 17 years old. Well, maybe younger, actually. But, you know, so when I say family, it is truly a family situation. You know, Samir and I, we take care of each other's families, our children. You know, my children think of him as their uncle. And you know, I really enjoy this environment for music. I've been in many different kind of situations where the connectivity was not with the group, but the music was great. But the connection between the musicians weren't as, you know, close. So this is a very unique situation.
Okay, and you know, it's a really interesting story that you just talked about. You know, the relationship that, you know, this strong bond that there is between the three of you, and you know, it's really nice to hear that, you know, it goes deeper than just the stage. And it's because I'm sure that many bands will tell the same, or they will tell that, yeah, we are also very close friends, but you know, from your words one can really hear that when you talk about the other members of the trio, it's really like if you're talking about your brothers, exactly. Real brothers. And that's very nice to hear. And when is it that you decided to become a pianist, and why did you choose the piano?
I think the piano ended up choosing me. I played about 4 other instruments. I started on cello because my mom is a cellist. She's a great cellist. And I moved to drums, and that's where I started my first group, from the drum chair. I was always in the mindset that I wanted a really good band. So I found a better drummer, and then I went to the trumpet. And as that band grew, we found a horn section that was just incredible. So I gave up the trumpet and started on the piano. And I had all these instruments. I had access to all of them in my house. So it was a very easy thing to go from one instrument to the next. So the piano was the one that stuck. That's the one that felt really... It felt much like the drums for me, because the drum, I really loved playing the drums. But when I heard this other drummer, I was like, well, my love for it is not going to make our band sound like shit. I want my band to sound good, so I would use this drummer and I'll pick another instrument. But finally getting to the piano was like finding a true love, you know, someone that understood me. And this instrument really is an incredible instrument to play. I can't say that every time I touch it, I can get to my maximum ability on it. And that's the challenge of it, you know, because, you know, being a pianist, you have to have the ability to pick up a blind date. So every night is a new date for me, you know. So we have to get to know each other really quick, and I have to be comfortable as much as I can with her, and just let her know everything that's in my heart. So that's how I think of the piano. You know, it's really like a person in a way that you have to relate to. And they're all quirky. They all have their quirks, you know. So, but I really enjoy the instrument that I chose, and I think the piano inevitably chose me. So.
And, you know, it's really nice to hear your words, because it really sounds, you know, like you're talking about the love. And it's really cool to hear these kind of things, like from a pianist such as yourself. And some of the listeners of the podcast are, you know, young pianists, or perhaps are studying the piano. What kind of advice would you have for them?
Well, I think my advice would be a little broader for musicians in general, because even though you might be playing the piano now, you might pick another instrument, who knows? But I think music is a very powerful and it's a very powerful and spiritual medium to communicate from. So I feel like if you're the kind of person that has things in their heart that they want to be able to express, then music would be a beautiful platform to do it on. If you're talented musically, I would suggest immediately doing some studying into the history of the instrument itself, from every aspect, from the European classical to you know the modern day forms that this instrument has, you know, existed through. If you're interested in jazz, I would suggest that you do quite a bit of research into not only the piano, but how the piano fits into the ensembles, and really and find a voice of your own within that knowledge. It takes time. It takes, like Freddie Hubbard said, it takes about 15 years to get your own sound. And I think one thing that I would suggest for any pianist or any musician is to develop the sound that you get from your instrument. It's the technical parts of being able to play the instrument fast and with dexterity is one thing. But to be able to produce a sound that is unique is the thing that in the end will win. Yeah, because the technical part is really just a part of learning how to play an instrument. You have to be technically advanced to really express yourself. But then once you've gotten to that point, and as you're developing that, you need to develop how to really communicate with the instrument. And that's a journey for everybody. There's no one way to do it. So, you know, that's the thing that I think everyone will find joy, you know, in learning about themselves. How do I really communicate through this instrument?
And that's a very question to end up this episode with. So if you're listening to this podcast and you would like to become a musician, think about what Marc Cary said about, you know, doing some research and, you know, trying to start to play an instrument, because it might happen like happened to him, that he started with an instrument and switched to another one and another one until he found the right one, the love, and the match was there. Mr. Cary, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I hope all your listeners really enjoy the music and just go back, and there's 22 more albums out there that I've put out in the last 15 years, last 20 years actually. So yeah, if you like what you hear, please check the rest of it.
All right. Thank you. Okay, everybody, we're back. First thing, Mr. Cary, if you're listening, thank you so much once again for being on the podcast, to telling us more about yourself, about the trio, and also for giving out advice for young musicians. I really appreciate it. So this is the Jazz Spotlight podcast, and if you like what you hear, you can also subscribe to the podcast for free on iTunes or Stitcher. So you can find the episodes of the podcast on the website at thejazzspotlight.com/podcast, but you can find it also on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. So if you head over to thejazzspotlight.com/show, you will be redirected to the iTunes page of the podcast where you can subscribe to the podcast there. Or if you're using Stitcher, just go to thejazzspotlight.com/Stitcher and you will be redirected to the Stitcher page of the podcast where you can also subscribe there, so that every day for this week and then every week you will get the new episode of the podcast to your music library or your device, smartphone, tablet, whatever you're using to listen to the podcast. I also would like to invite you, if you like the podcast, if you liked what you heard so far, to leave a review and ratings on iTunes. That would be really appreciated if you could just spend 1 minute of your time to leave a short review or just ratings at the iTunes page of the podcast, again at thejazzspotlight.com/show. That would really help the podcast, because it would also help people who might, benefit from the podcast find it on iTunes, because, the reviews impact the kind of rankings in the search engine of iTunes. So that would really help if you could help out with a short review or rating. I would really appreciate it. So again, this was the episode 17. You can find all the links of the things we talked about with Marc Cary at thejazzspotlight.com/episode 17. I'm Yanni Lunga, and this is the special edition of the Jazz Spotlight podcast. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Take care.